10 or 12 kids here, and I was signing autographs, and the one boy looks up at me and he goes, "Hey Goose, why are you crying?" And I said, "Well, they're tearing down my old stadium." He says, "Goose, if it makes you feel any better, my dad cried too." And it was one of the neatest things, with that kid saying that, and it just touched me so much that old ballpark and so many memories, still today. Chicago holds a kindness in my heart that I can't really even describe. To go on to have the kind of career that I had, the 9 teams that I played for, that I had the privilege of playing for, baseball has a great saying. Baseball is made up of players that have been humbled and those that soon will be. And it's a very humbling game, and people always ask me everywhere I go, "Hey Goose, how are you such a great relief pitcher?" I said, I couldn't remember what the hell happened last night. I didn't know whether it was good or bad, but you had a disaster last night. You go into tonight's game, for you young players out there, you have a disaster last night, you give up a bases loaded home run, grand slam, to lose the ball game, or 1 run, you just give up 1 run to end up losing that ball game. If you're thinking about the disaster that happened last night, tonight, the same disaster is going to happen. So it's a matter of being conditioned in your brain that a short memory is a beautiful thing. We build on the good, we learn from the bad, and we let it go. We turn the page. Tomorrow's a new day. Because I learned this the hard way. I would be thinking about that disaster the night before, coming into the same situation tonight, and ending up having 2 disasters in a row. And you can't allow, baseball is like life itself. Every life lesson is out there on that baseball field. I tell parents this every time that I get to speak in a group of people that have kids Little League. I think we put way too much emphasis on wins and losses. It's not about the wins and losses. It's about how we go about it, how we accept failure. Baseball, they say, football, or you'll get arguments, hockey or golf or whatever is the toughest game to play. There are arguments out there. But I think there is nothing like baseball. What else can you fail at 7 out of 10 times and be a superstar? Anything else that I can think of that we fail 7 out of 10 times, we don't have a job. We're done. And, baseball, it just goes to show you how really tough. And it's a game of failure. And it's how we deal with that failure, the kids, how we learn how to deal with that failure that's going to dictate what kind of careers we have. The amount of confidence that we have in ourselves directly correlates with the success that we'll have. Believing in ourselves, going out there, getting your ass kicked, and going back out there and thinking good things. It's as simple as this. We think good things and good things happen. On the other hand, we think bad things and bad things happen. And baseball, that's why baseball parallels life in every way. How we deal with failure and how we deal in failure in life and on that baseball field. And that's why it's so important for our kids to understand this. That's how they deal with failure is going to dictate where they go in life. If your son doesn't even make it, or daughters now that are playing softball, if they don't make it to the big leagues, hey, you haven't failed. It's how you go about that job and accepting it. It goes back to that, I cried the whole day after I signed that contract with the Chicago White Sox because I was scared to death. Like I said, I'd never been out of the state of Colorado. And I went up where my dad and I used to hunt. I borrowed my brother's Jeep, drove way back into this place in a secluded area that my dad and I used to do a lot of hunting and arrowhead hunting and things, just hiking and just being out in the country. And I sat there and I cried all day long, wondering what I had gotten myself into. These fictitious cartoon characters like Mickey Mantle and, Aaron and Al Kaline, Frank Robinson, these great players that I thought, I can't get these guys out. Little town, Colorado Springs at that time, like I said, I'd never met a big leaguer in the flesh. I thought, I'm starting on something that I really, have no idea about how good I am. I know I'm good here, but I promised myself that day and made that promise that I was going to give it my best shot. No shoulda, woulda, couldas, no ifs, ands, or buts. I was going to give it my best shot. And I wanted to put that big league uniform on one time. And that one time turned into 22 years. And playing for Tony and playing for Chuck Tanner. Tony I played for toward the end of my career. I got to play for him for 2 years. Tony invited me back to camp the second year. After the second year, the third year. And he told me right up front when I got invited back, he said, hey, you're not going to make the club this year. He said, we're going to go a different direction. But he said, I want you to come to camp because he said, somebody's going to pick you up and we're going to give you some exposure. And I ended up hooking up with Seattle. My career started out on the first strike. I faded in on the first strike. And my career spanned all 8 work stoppages, whether it be a lockout by the owners or a strike by the players union. And it ended up in 1994, the Seattle Mariners after that year, and after Tony had told me that I, wasn't going to make the club, but man, it was a blessing in disguise. It opened eyes, and I had a pretty good spring. It gave me some innings, exposed myself, and the Seattle Mariners picked me up. In August of that year, we went on strike, and it was the 8th work stoppage and the last one that baseball has seen, and hopefully we never see another one. Hopefully we can work together, baseball and the union, and never have to lose a World Series and miss a World Series like we did in 1994. People say, Goose, don't you wish you played with all the money? I said, hey, you know what? I'd have paid them to play. I couldn't rub 2 nickels together. It was just an amazing ride. I kind of compare it to being a kid going to Disney World for the first time and getting in a line at their favorite ride and waiting for 2 hours to get on that ride, and it lasts a couple of minutes. I got on the greatest ride in the world, and it lasted for 22 years. And I still have to pinch myself that I had that kind of career. I would meet a Hall of Famer throughout my career, my travels around baseball during the season. Hall of Famers would show up and throw out first pitches, come in the clubhouse, meet us, and I thought, man, what must that be like, being a Hall of Famer? Toward the end of my career, people started whispering or saying, hey, you got a shot to go into the Hall of Fame. And I just couldn't even comprehend that possibility. Well, 8 years after you got to wait 5 years to be eligible for the vote. It happened 8 years later, 9 years later. I was elected, and all I ever tried to do was point out, hey, please don't compare me to these guys today because the numbers just don't equate. When I broke in 1972, Mr. Tanner, Chuck, and Roland, and Johnny, they said, you're going to be in the bullpen. At that time, it had just started to evolve. It become more specialized. And Chuck said, hey, you're going to be in the bullpen. Me and Terry Forrester, if you remember that name. And, I didn't care. Hell, I didn't want to be in the bullpen. That was where old starters went. It was like an old junk pile down there where old starters went that couldn't start anymore. And so my experience throughout was I saw that total evolution of the bullpen of what it used to be. We used to come in when that starter